When I was starting out in my preaching career, someone shared a bit of advice that I thought would really improve my technique and skills. They said, always start your sermon with a joke. I'd watched a lot of sermons from a lot of different preaching styles, and sure enough, many of the most well-known preachers began their sermons with a joke. The guy who gave me this advice said that was the best way to connect with the congregation. It's a good icebreaker. It helps get everyone settled before you get into your point. He was convinced that this was sage advice. So here it goes. A Sunday school teacher asked her class, does anyone know what we mean by sins of omission? One of the children said, those are the sins we shouldn't have committed, but didn't. Should have committed, but we didn't. We didn't commit, we omitted. It's not funny. It's not working. Okay, look, there's a famous quote among comedians that goes, dying is easy, comedy is hard. Sometimes good advice isn't always. That said, adding a bit of humor into a teaching moment is a good tool to help keep people engaged, especially if the lessons are repetitive. I think that's what's happening in today's gospel. Jesus is not known for his funny bone. And while we say he was fully divine and fully human, we never spend time considering his levity. It's too subtle. We know that Jesus spent a lot of time comparing the kingdom of heaven to all sorts of things. It's like a pearl, it's like a coin, yeast, a king, fishing nets, a homeowner. There's more. After a while, it gets to be a lot. Jesus speaks of the kingdom of heaven more than just about anything else. All the gospel accounts offer us some image of what this place is like. In some parts of the gospel, Jesus offers up one after another example in a parable of what the kingdom of heaven is like in rapid succession. In today's gospel verses from Mark, we get 2 in a row. But this is after a whole string of parables that leads up to the verses we get to in the lectionary selection today. We don't read the previous examples. While we only have to work with 2, the original hearers have already had several other parabolic examples of the kingdom of heaven to get through before they get to these. By the time they get to this point, their attention may have strayed. Jesus draws a comparison between the kingdom of heaven and a mustard plant. In this part of the world, we don't really have those. For most of us, mustard is just a condiment. I mean, it's good, but it never takes center stage. In the part of the world where Jesus lived, mustard plants were kind of a problem. When Jesus tells them that this tiny seed becomes this really big plant, he's not telling them something they don't already know. Mustard plants were invasive. They quickly got out of control. When Jesus went on to say that they're so big, how big are they? They're so big, birds nest in them. It's not exactly a knee slapper. It's more like an eye roll. The people probably responded with like, oh yeah, they get that big. Sheesh. One wonders if Jesus wrapped up his kingdom of heaven parables with this one because his hearers were glazing over with all the repetitive metaphors. Maybe they already got the point 2 or 3 parables ago. Yes, yes, Jesus, the kingdom of heaven is a landowner, a treasure, a woman with a lost coin. We get it, move on. If that was the case, then this ultimate metaphor brings Jesus exactly to the point he's trying to make. Jesus's point is that the kingdom of heaven is not what we think it's going to be. It will do far more than what we think it will. That one little seed is not to be trifled with. The potential contained within it will be far more far-reaching than we think. The mustard plant will not be what we would prefer it to be: manageable, contained, reasonable, within the boundaries of expectation and control. No, the kingdom of heaven is still growing. We have very little say in what it's ultimately going to be. When Jesus teaches us to pray that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, it's not an aspirational hope. It's a warning. This mustard seed will become something so big that even birds and other non-human creatures will want to be part of it. It will be a benefit to more than we can ask or imagine. And just like a mustard plant, it's not going to be something that will necessarily align with our expectations. In that way, the kingdom of heaven will be a challenge to us. We ought not write this parable off as hyperbole. God is always telling us that something new is happening. Paul writes to the Corinthians in the second reading, "If anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. Everything old is passed away. See, everything has become new." In Paul's time, there was constant debate about who could and could not be part of the household of God. Jews, certainly, but I don't know about those Gentiles. But now see how Christianity has developed from our Jewish roots. I wonder if even Paul would recognize us today. One never knows what God is up to. And be assured that God is not done with us yet. That mustard plant kingdom of heaven is still growing. Ours is to learn to be okay with giving it the space for it to become what it's going to be, and to delight in it as God delights. The first reading from Samuel shows us something like this playing out. Samuel is to identify the next king for God's people. The Israelites are about to become something new and progress further toward the kingdom of heaven. Jesse knows something is up, that God is about to do a new thing, and he gets to be part of it. Can you imagine if God came to you and said, "Show me what you've got, because I'm about to make something truly spectacular with it"? Wouldn't you want to bring your best to God? It's clear in the lesson that what God thinks is valuable and important is not necessarily what we think is valuable and important. Just as God looks more carefully into things, we also ought to look more carefully into things to discern the divine wisdom. Where we might overlook what's right in front of us, God sees tremendous potential. That little kid out there minding the sheep was a mustard seed. Fast forward to us today. The branches of the kingdom of heaven have stretched far and wide, but God is not done yet. The kingdom of heaven is still growing. Just when we might think we get what the kingdom of heaven is all about, yes, it's like this and it's like that, God has something new to teach us. What new birds will these branches attract? What might we make of the branches all around us? Unwise is trying to prune the kingdom of heaven to fit our idea of a reasonable mustard plant. God delights in the growth of the kingdom of heaven, and we are wise to look more deeply into it to discern God's will. If nothing else, the wisdom of Jesus today teaches us to stay alert to what God is up to. Just when we think we know where Jesus is going with a lesson, we find he's about to take us to a new level in our faith.